Michael, to bring you in, you're somewhat sceptical this rule is going to be removed. The Minister said it will be this morning.
Well, she said that, but she said that, a couple of days after the government abandoned a pledge that it was in the programme for government to protect atheist teachers from discrimination in schools. She said it about a year after they have still not held a referendum on the blasphemy clause in the Constitution after saying that they would so. So we're quite sceptical about this government's commitment to carrying through on pledges relating to secular issues. That said, if she does remove it, it will be a symbolic step, but only a symbolic step. What Rule 68 does is it obliges schools to permeate religion throughout the curriculum. But the Education Act in Section 15 also obliges schools to implement the ethos of the patron, and in most cases the patron is the local Roman Catholic bishop.
To take David's point, and to be fair to David, he said that if it applies to all schools, Rule 68, which my understanding is it does, that it's patently wrong and needed at a minimum to be reformed. You have to accept that is that a valid standpoint?
Well, no, it needs to be not only reformed but reversed. It needs to be replaced by a clause that says that outside of the faith formation classes, which faith schools are entitled to have and which non-religious parents are entitled to opt their children out of, but outside of that, the state curriculum itself should be delivered in an objective and critical and pluralistic manner. And the religious ethos, even in a faith school, should not be permeated through the other subjects.
David, what do you make of the idea, and this happens because I visited an Educate Together, that they have to teach religion as well? They are obligated to teach religion. And if something is an obligation, it tends not to be done very well rather than voluntary.
You see, I think that in the education debate, for the most part, parents should be in the driver's seats because it's their children, obviously, in those schools. Now, they're not the only stakeholder, obviously. The wider society is stakeholders as well, but the parents are the chief stakeholders in our schools. And if there is demand for a type of school that has no sort of RE class of any description whatsoever, I think that demand should be met. And if Educate Together schools, for the sake of the argument, didn't want to teach RE in any form, okay, and I think what they teach mainly is kind of all religions, okay, they don't actually engage in faith formation. But if they wanted to put all RE classes outside of school time in whatever form, that would be 100% fine by me. But I think actually Educate Together want to teach about religion rather than teach faith formation. I think that's actually what they want to do.
They teach about all religions, whereas if you look at the way that in a Catholic school it's thought it's only about Catholicism, no other mention of religion for other types of religion until second level.
We shouldn't concentrate obviously only on Catholic schools because we have a whole variety of faith-based schools.
92%
yeah,
of
sure,
schools are
because of the composition of the Irish population, certainly in the past. But a Catholic, like if you send your child to a Church of Ireland or Catholic school and you are in support of the ethos of that school, it makes sense that you want your children to be formed in your own faith, and that is a right of parents.
But people are having their children baptised just to go to these schools. That the Archbishop acknowledged that.
Yeah, and so what needs to happen there again is more school choice, and also the government and the state need to provide enough places where there's a shortage of places. There's 20% of schools where there's a shortage of places. So clearly the state needs to provide enough school places to meet demand.
Okay, and that argument is a valid one, Michael. You have to say that there's clearly a shortage of spaces if people want to go to other than Catholic schools, and that they are the majority. There's no option for them. So is it a matter of space rather than a matter of faith?
It's a matter of four separate things, which Atheist Ireland describes in what we call the Schools Equality Pact. PACT is an acronym for patronage, access, curriculum and teaching. All four of those areas have to be integrated together in any solution. Just tackling any one of them on its own isn't going to resolve the problem. There's no point in getting access to a school where you're discriminated against once you've got access. There's no point in qualifying to be a teacher if you're not allowed to teach unless you pretend that you're a Catholic. All of these issues have to be tackled together, and thankfully the public pressure is building for that solution, but we need an integrated solution, not just individual pieces of the jigsaw being thrown around.
Would you consider the removal of Rule 68 to be the start of the unravelling of the strong link that's there between the Catholic Church and education?
It would certainly be a symbolic step, because it would mean that the state is no longer obliging schools to integrate religion throughout the curriculum, but the state would still be permitting schools unless it also changes Section 15 of the Education Act. And
so again, come back to this, David, if it was to be replaced, and there's no suggestion that they're going to do this, by the way, it's just being removed, you're saying that for Catholic schools that this type of rule should still be written in?
for faith schools generally. I mean,
but you have to accept that that's still the majority of schools.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's about, 93-94% of schools in Ireland, primary schools in Ireland, that is, are faith-based. There should be far fewer.
But even by your own admission, 56% of parents, that translates to 44% of children in those schools
that's according to an opinion poll today. Again, you'd like to see the question. But the Department of Education a couple of years ago did a survey of parents in 43 areas around the country, taking in 300 schools. And one of the questions more or less was, if there was another type of school available in your area, a non-denominational one, would you send your child to that school? And only about 10% said yes.
But I have to put it to you that the reason for that is because in rural areas, you go to the local school. The local school might happen to be a Catholic school, but the point is it takes all comers. There's no issue over coming through the door whether you're a Catholic or not.
Yeah,
they take you. And Father Paddy Byrne was on the programme yesterday, says patronage isn't an issue for people in rural areas.
Yeah, but you see, but that's kind of the point. If people didn't want there to be, if they didn't want a school in their locality to be a Catholic school or a Church of Ireland school, let's say, then presumably there would have been an excess of 10% demand for an alternative revealed in this Department of Education survey of the 43 areas around the country and the 300 schools. So it found very little. I wish, by the way, more demand had been made visible for divestment of schools, because divestment of schools, from my point of view, is taking place far too slowly. I think it'd be healthier all around if divestment of faith-based schools happened much quicker than it is.
Michael?
Yeah, divestment is a distraction. Even with the maximum possible divestment that the government is talking about, which would be 300 Educate Together schools, the vast majority of schools would still be controlled by the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is trying to trade off divesting some schools for having a stronger Catholic ethos in the schools that they maintain. And over half of the schools will still be what they call standalone schools. It's the only school in the area. So most secular parents, even under maximum divestment, will not only have no access to secular schools, but will only have access to a school with an even stronger Catholic ethos.
Well, I mean, like the figure of 300 is essentially, I mean, I've seen that figure, but Rory Quinn...
That's what Educate Together are looking for.
Sure, that's fine, but Educate Together is not the only player in the education market. Rory Quinn a while back said maybe 50% of schools should be divested. Father Michael Drum of the Catholic Schools Partnership said 10%. It should be in accordance with demand. The figure could be 10%, it could be 50%, it could be 70%. It should be in accordance with demand.
Well, no, it's not a question of demand, because it's a human rights issue. If you have a right to a secular education, which you have under international human rights law, it doesn't depend on what a majority of your neighbours... But
parents also have a right to faith-based education, which has never been denied by any international court ever. In fact, there was a decision of the European Court of Human Rights about 4 or 5 years ago. It was about state schools in Italy that have crucifixes up on the wall, and they were allowed to have crucifixes on the wall of state schools by the European Court of Human Rights.
Do you object to the idea of a faith-based school? And because they exist in other countries, do you want the religion out of every school, or should schools who want to be Catholic schools and have that stronger ethos be allowed to do that?
Well, no, what we need is the state needs to provide a foundation of inclusive schools that don't promote either religion or atheism, but that are neutral between all religious or non-religious beliefs. Now, if that is there, then on top of that, having faith schools as an added option isn't a problem, but having them as the basis of the system is the problem.
But you don't want, as far as I understand, Michael, and maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want any public funding going to faith schools, isn't that correct?
That's right, or to atheist schools. I mean, as strongly opposed to the state promoting atheism as they are to the state promoting religion.
But see, it wouldn't be the state promoting it. It would be, I mean, if you found enough parents and enough demand for a school that actually did promote your beliefs, including atheism, I would have absolutely no problem with that, so long as you have no problem.
Well, that's our difference, you see. We don't want to indoctrinate children, and you do.
Okay, can I finish up by making a point?
Awesomely loaded.
To both of you. David, this rule from 1965 is clearly out of date. I mean, I think you're in agreement that it was out of date. It needs
to be changed.
The fact that 92% of schools are in Catholic patronage at the moment is that, by the way history has progressed, almost a default position now. That's the way it was in 1965. Mm-hmm. As the rule is out of date, that is also the way that the schools are formed now, and that we need to change a lot quicker. I know you say you're in favour of divestment, but the argument could be made that even if parents didn't want to get involved, that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen.
Well, I think it should happen. And I mean, but
how much? To what degree?
I have been writing a column since 1994, and ever since then I've been arguing that there should be fewer Catholic schools.
By how many? If it's 92%, what percentage is acceptable to you?
I don't know, because I actually don't know what the real level of demand for those schools is. But let's pluck a figure out of the air. Let's say 30% get divested. All all right? You see, like in my vision of the education system, the state responds to a parental demand and it funds what parents want, including faith-based schools. In Michael's vision, the demand of parents for faith-based schools gets denied. They have to fund it fully out of their own private resources.
And Michael, just to finish up with you, why didn't parents get involved in the patronage discussion that Rory Quinn tried?
Why didn't
parents get involved? There was a discussion about patronage. Very few people actually bothered responding.
Well, most parents, in practical terms, are trying to do their best for their children in the current situation. That's their priority. And so if they've got a choice, even down to baptising their children into religion they don't believe in, some parents will do so. But independently of that, this is an issue of human rights.
Of course it is.
And it goes beyond parental demand. If a majority of people want to deny your human rights, that doesn't mean that your human rights should be denied.
Yeah, but you don't see my request to have faith-based schools and the request of many people as legitimate unless we can fund it out of private resources. Okay. So you're denying me my human rights.
No, not if there is a foundation of inclusive schools, then you can build those as alternatives.
Okay, I think both
only
points,
privately funded.
Both points have been made. David Quinn, Director of the Iona Institute, and Michael Nugent of Atheist Ireland. Thank you both very much for joining us in studio.